He stepped out the back of an airliner, in the middle of a storm, and was never seen again. On the night before Thanksgiving, 1971, over the forests of southwest Washington, a man in a business suit and thin loafers jumped into the freezing rain with $200,000 strapped to his body. He left almost nothing behind: 2 parachutes, a handful of cigarette butts, and a cheap black clip-on tie, dropped on the seat, the object that would become the closest thing we have to his fingerprint. He is the only person in American history to hijack a passenger jet and vanish. Portland, Oregon. A middle-aged man in a dark business suit, white shirt, and black tie pays cash for a one-way ticket to Seattle under the name Dan Cooper. He boards Northwest Orient Flight 305, takes a seat near the back of the plane, orders a bourbon and soda, and lights a cigarette. Nothing about him draws a second glance. Later, the crew will barely be able to describe his face. Shortly after takeoff, he hands a note to a flight attendant. She assumes it is a lonely businessman's phone number and slips it into her pocket, unread. He leans toward her and says, quietly, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." Then he opens the briefcase on his lap, just enough for her to see red cylinders, a tangle of wire, a battery. From that moment, the plane belongs to him. His demands are calm, precise, and almost polite. $200,000 in American currency. For parachutes, 2 main, 2 reserve. And a fuel truck standing by in Seattle to refuel the plane the moment it lands. He dictates it all without raising his voice. On the ground, the FBI makes a decision: they will give him everything he asks for, and try to catch him later. For nearly 2 hours, Flight 305 circles the darkening sky over Puget Sound while agents scramble on the ground below. The money is gathered as 10,000 unmarked $20 bills, but before it is handed over, every single serial number is photographed onto microfilm. The passengers, meanwhile, are told only that there is a minor mechanical delay. Most of them never learn how close they are sitting to a man with a bomb. At the Seattle airport, the plane sits on a dark, rain-slicked apron. A single staff member carries the ransom and the parachutes up the stairs. In exchange, Cooper keeps his word. He releases all 36 passengers and 2 of the flight attendants. He keeps the 2 pilots, the flight engineer, and 1 attendant, the people he still needs to fly the plane exactly where he intends to go. His instructions to the pilots are strange and very specific. Fly toward Mexico City. Stay below 10,000 feet. Keep the flaps down and the speed under 200 knots. Leave the cabin unpressurized and lower the rear stairway of the aircraft in flight. It is a flight profile that makes no sense for a passenger jet. It makes perfect sense for one thing only: a man who is planning to jump. At around 7:45, the plane lifts off again, straight into a freezing rainstorm rolling over the wilderness of southwest Washington. Cooper orders the last flight attendant into the cockpit and tells her to stay there and pull the curtain. As she goes, she glances back once, and sees him tying the heavy money bag to the front of his body with a length of parachute cord. It is the last time anyone sees his face. At 13 minutes past 8, a warning light flickers on in the cockpit. The rear stairway is open. Minutes later, the crew feels it, a sudden bump of pressure through the airframe, as though the aircraft has shifted its weight. Somewhere over the black forest below, in air near 20 degrees below freezing and a wind of nearly 200 miles an hour, a man in a business suit and thin loafers steps off the end of the stairway into the dark. He is not wearing a single piece of survival gear. And with that step, Dan Cooper disappears from the world. What follows becomes the longest and most exhaustive manhunt in the history of the FBI, a case they file under the name Norjack. Hundreds of agents. Soldiers on foot sweeping the forests. Boats and divers working the lakes and rivers of the drop zone. Over the years, more than 1,000 suspects will be questioned. And through all of it, one problem never goes away: nobody actually knows where he came down. In the dark, in the storm, the crew could only estimate the moment he jumped, which meant the search area was not a field, but a vast tangle of mountain forest, deep ravine and cold river, stretching for miles in every direction. Teams comb it for weeks. They find no parachute, no body, no briefcase, and not one of the 10,000 marked $20 bills. It is as if the man had never landed at all. The evidence he left behind fits in a small box. The 2 unused parachutes, 8 cigarette butts, a borrowed coat, and the black clip-on tie dropped on his seat. From the crew's memories, investigators build a composite sketch: a man in his mid-40s, dark hair swept back, an ordinary face in an ordinary suit. It is a portrait that, over 50 years, will come to resemble almost everyone and match no one. For 9 years, the case goes cold. Then, in February of 1980, an 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram is smoothing a spot for a fire on a sandy bank of the Columbia River, at a place called Tina Bar. A few inches under the sand, his hand closes on something soft and rotted. He pulls up 3 bundles of decaying $20 bills. The serial numbers are still legible on enough of the bills to check them against the FBI's microfilm. They match. Exactly. It is Cooper's ransom, $5,800 of it, still bound in the rubber bands the agents had wrapped around it 9 years before. After nearly a decade of nothing, it is the first hard proof that any of it was ever real. And it raises more questions than it answers. Because Tina Bar makes no sense. It lies miles from where the crew believed he jumped, and on a stretch of river that had already been searched. The bills are worn round at the edges, as if the water had tumbled them for years, yet the rubber bands are perfectly intact, when water and time should have rotted them away first. Only that one small share of the money ever surfaced. Where the rest went, and how this bundle reached that beach, has never been explained. Over the decades, the suspects pile up. A copycat hijacker who pulled off almost the same crime months later. An airline employee whose relatives were certain it was him. A dying man's whispered confession. A retired paratrooper with a criminal past. Each one seems to fit a piece of the profile: the calm, the aviation knowledge, the nerve. And each one, in the end, fails to fit the whole. In 2016, after 45 years, the FBI formally closes the investigation, Unsolved. To this day, it remains the only unsolved act of air piracy in American history. And underneath every theory lies a colder question that no one can answer either: did he even survive? A jump into a storm, at night, in a suit and loafers, with no light and no gear, over freezing wilderness. Most experts say a man could not have lived through it. And yet no body, no parachute, and almost none of the money was ever found. Which brings us back to the tie. Decades after the jump, investigators put it under an electron microscope and found particles clinging to the fabric that had no business being on a cheap department store tie, pure titanium, and traces of rare earth metals. It hinted that Cooper had worked somewhere that machined exotic alloys, an aerospace plant, perhaps, in an era when Boeing itself was building supersonic jets from titanium just miles away. It is the closest thing to a fingerprint the man ever left. And it points to everyone, and no one. The tie is still in an evidence box. The forest still keeps its secret. And Dan Cooper is still out there in it, the man who stepped into the dark with $200,000 and never came back.